Gopijana Ballabha Giri Baradhari Gopijana Ballabha Giri Baradhari Yasura Nandana Raja Janaranjana Yasura Nandana Raja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Giri Varadhari Gopijana Vallabha Giri Varadhari Yasura Nandana Raja Janaranjana Yasura Nandana Raja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Giri Varadhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Giri Varadhari Yasura Nandana Raja Janaranjana Yasura Nandana Raja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Giri Varadhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Giri Varadhari Yasura Nandana Raja Janaranjana Yasura Nandana Raja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Hari Radha Hari Hari Shri Radhe Jaya Radha Hari Radha Hari Hari Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jaya Jagannath Jaya Jagannath Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Mr. Paramahansa Sivananda Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Sri Radhagiri Hari Bhagavan ki Jai Jai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Gaur. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Was there any class yesterday? There was. Okay. All right. Okay. Know where exactly they got up to here. But anyway, I can read from. During his fourth year at Scottish churches, Abai began to feel reluctant about accepting his degree. As a sympathizer to the nationalist cause, he preferred national schools and self-government over the British institution. But he could see that as yet no such alternatives existed. Gandhi, however, was calling on Indian students to partake their studies. The foreign-run schools, he said, instilled a slave mentality that made one no more than a puppet in the hands of the British. Still, a college degree was the basis of a life's career. Abai weighed the choices carefully. Gaur Mahan didn't want Abai to do something he would later regret. He had always tried to plan the best for his son, but Abai was 23 and would have to make this decision for himself. Gaur Mahan thought of the future. The horoscope said his son would be a great religious preacher at age 70, but Gaur Mahan did not expect to live to see it. Still, he had every reason to accept the horoscope as accurate, and he wanted to prepare Abai. Great preacher at 70. So that would have been, 60. Prabhupada appeared in 1896, and 70 years later was 1966. Yeah, pretty good on the prediction. It's 65, 66. Yeah, exactly. 70 years. Great religious preacher at the age of 70. So we see that our Prabhupada had gone pretty seriously into the movement, Gandhi movement, and Gandhi was calling on students to give up their education at these British-run colleges and schools. And as we've been saying in the last few days, it was one of the means that the British used to subjugate people and indoctrinate in certain ways the British superiority over the Indian culture and Indian education and so on and so forth. So, you know, there was a, seemed to be a pretty strong movement to do whatever it took to rebel against the authority of the British. Anyway, now we're hearing that Gaur Mahan, Abai was thinking about accepting his degree. He was in the fourth year, and he was obviously he had discussed it with his father also. He wanted to prepare. He tried to plan things accordingly, but there was no way to guess what Krishna would do. Everything depended on Krishna, and Krishna was above nationalism, above planning and the laws of astrology, and above the desires of a modest cloth merchant aspiring to make his son a pure devotee of Srimati Radharani and a preacher of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada's father was very devotional, very devoted personality, preacher of Srimad Bhagavatam, devotee of Srimati Radharani. This was how the father saw Abai as becoming something like that. So although Gomahan had allowed Abai to do what he wanted, he also carefully guided him always on the path he knew was best. Now, without interfering with Abai's decision about college, Gomahan set about to arrange good employment for him regardless of what else might happen. In 1920, Abai completed his 4th year of college and took the BA exam. Afterwards, with the ordeal of final examinations behind him, he took a short vacation to fulfill a long cherished desire. He travelled alone a day's journey by train to Jagannath Puri. To Prabhupada. This is a direct quote from Prabhupada. Every day of my boyhood, I used to think how to go to Jagannath Puri and how to go to Vrindavan. At that time, the fare was for Vrindavan 4 or 5 rupees. And similarly for Jagannath Puri. So I was thinking, when shall I go? I took the first opportunity to go to Jagannath Puri. Rupee was worth more in those days. 4 or 5 rupees these days I can buy you. When I first went to India, there was the rupee was higher value. There was like 6 or 7 rupees to the dollar. Now it's like 50, 60, depending on which dollar you're talking about. 70 for the American. I seem to remember it was 6 or 7 for the American. That time, Australian New Zealand dollars were around about the same. Dollar, slightly more. And so 6 or 7, but the rupee has devalued quite significantly over the years. So, and you could buy a lot with a rupee, with 1 rupee. So Prabhupada was thinking how to go to Jagannath Puri, how to go to Vrindavan. These days we don't think about really going, jumping on a plane and being on the other side of the world the next day. You know, my life, other traveling preachers' life, and travel around really fast. So we don't think that much of that. But he was dreaming about going to Jagannath Puri and bring that. So Jagannath Puri, the most popular way. Of course, you could go by bus. I did that once. Never do it again. Go by bus from Mayapur, and that was the deal. The best way is by train. You can fly to Bhubaneswar. Take cab there, but you go to the by train. Prabhupada sounds like Prabhupada. Of course, he was living in Calcutta, so the obvious choice would have been train. So go by train to Puri, or drive into Puri station. But you've got to pick the train. In India, it's all about picking the right actual train, not just catching a train to a destination. You've got to know the name of the train. So I found that out the hard way too. For many years of traveling around India by plane and by sometimes by buses, you can avoid the bus. No, don't take a bus. But by train. So I remember one time I was with some brahmacharis heading down to Puri. We were staying at a life member's house just overnight, and we went down to get our tickets, and we came back. He said, "Did you get your ticket to Puri?" I said, "Yes, we got the tickets all right, the train tickets." Said, "Which train did you get?" We got the Puri Express. He said, "Oh no, you got the wrong train." I said, "Wow, there's other trains that go to Puri." There's another train called the Jagannath Express. The Puri Express is like you know, it stops every station. It's like, you know, it takes forever to get down there. Puri Express. But the Jagannath Express only stops a few places. You know, not everyone, and the cow gets on with it. Oh, he said you made it, and sure enough, you know, when we got on there, we could understand what he was saying. That yeah, you don't go to Puri Express, you go to the Jagannath. A little did we know that there's one train called Puri and the other one called Jagannath. So and you learn the hard way. So you know, all over India, very good going by train in India. One of the best ways to go. If you've got to go on, you know, you've got to find out. Maybe it's changed now, but there's the narrow gauge line and the wide gauge line. So you've got to know which train goes on what track. If you go the narrow gauge, so you're going to get a pretty bumpy ride. And if you go the wide gauge, what's that? Yeah, or the classic ticket. Oh. Black shirts. First class, yeah. You've got to be careful about getting on the right train. That's a whole drama. I remember years ago myself and Bella bought a first class. Actually, we went to the train station at Nabadweep. Let's get a train from Nabadweep to Calcutta. So then when we got to the station, Mom said, "Let's get a first class. I'm sick of traveling as you know, cattle class. You know, let's get a first class ticket." So we bought first class. It was quite significantly more than just an ordinary ticket. So we were waiting, and the train come in, and then we got on the train, and actually we go, "Where?" You know, and it was already packed out. So we're asking around, you know, where's the first class? We didn't even get a seat, you know, let alone first class. We didn't even get a seat. And as we didn't, you know, you had to hang on to the straps, and then when you're hanging on to the strap, other people were hanging on to the same strap. You know, so then I asked someone, "Where's the first class going?" And if you looked around and you laughed and said, "Everywhere's first class." What we found out later is actually we got on the wrong train. We got on the one that we were supposed to get on that had the first class carriages was the next train coming in. So it's all a steep learning curve unless you know what's going on. As is in, you know, when you're traveling to a foreign country, especially India, so many things going on. So Prabhupada used to like traveling. Hari Suri told me he used to like traveling by train, especially in India. And how to go to Vrindavan. Later on, Prabhupada would go to Jagannath Puri and we would go to Vrindavan. When shall I took the first opportunity to go to Jagannath Puri. So we'll read on a little bit. He walked along the same broad street where for thousands of, so this is in Puri, for thousands of years the Rath Yatra procession had passed. In the market shops displayed small carved and painted wooden murtis of Lord Jagannath. Although it was not Rath Yatra season, tourists were purchasing souvenirs, and in the temple they purchased Jagannath Prasadam. In the Jagannath temple, 56 gigantic offerings of cooked rice and vegetables were presented daily in worship before the deities of Jagannath, Balaram and Subhadra. As I entered the temple and saw the deities, so no problem for Prabhupada going in the Jagannath temple, at least at that time. You know, now we can't go inside the temple. We're foreigners. And even if you're Indian from a foreign country, they won't let you in. You're contaminated. Asking your gotra, where you've been living. I remember I was thinking of sneaking in because I'm a little dark, and I went out to the beach for a few days and got really suntan dark, really dark. So I thought that I'd get really dark and, you know, sneak in. I actually had it all planned. I'll get white. At that time, I think it was a brahmachari. So then I'll buy some white fur and white dhoti and wear it like a lungi, like the Indians do. And so then I'm all real dark, and then then I'll sneak in, and they'll just think I'm local. But then I found out the day before that when you actually go in there, all these they've got these kind of security that just mill around and come up to people and start talking to them, in Orisin or in Hindi, just ask them questions who they are. They ask what their gotra is, what your gotra, where do you live. They just ask you questions. And so I didn't know that beforehand, but we found out, I think, Lord Jagannath's mercy, because maybe I would have roughed up and thrown out, trying to sneak in. Later on, we found out that some devotees paid a lot of money to get in. They paid one of the funders a lot of money. A group of devotees got in. He snuck them in very early in the morning when there was no one else around. And but they had to pay a lot of money. This group of devotees were from England, so they paid in pounds. So you wouldn't tell me exactly how much he said, but it was a lot. So the funder, seeing the opportunity for making a few bucks. Said, all right, I'll get you in. I'll bring you in a side way, and you have to come at like early in the morning, like 3 o'clock. When I'm on duty, So they got in. They were able to see the deity. So at that time, Prabhupada looked like he got in no problem. After he entered the temple, saw the deities on the side altar stood the Murti of Lord Chaitanya in his 6-armed form, Sadbhuj form, inside the temple of Jagannath. I can't remember if I knew that before. Manifesting himself simultaneously as Krishna, Rama, and the sannyasi Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya was famous in Puri, where he had spent the last 18 years of his life conducting Hare Krishna Kirtan with his followers and dancing ecstatically at the yearly Rath Yatra, as the carts were wheeled along the main road, surrounded by thousands of devotees. Lord Chaitanya had danced and swooned in the ecstasy of his intense love and separation from Lord Krishna. Passing over the parade route, Abhay recalled his own childhood, singing and dancing in the street, the miniature cart, the procession, Jagannath smiling, his father and mother, Radha Govinda. Somehow the fame of Lord Jagannath had inspired him as a child and had remained with him all these years. When shall I go to Jagannath Puri? He said when he was a child. His childhood dreaming of Puri and Vrindavan, and his compulsively studying the train timetables. He would go to the train and have a look at the time when they would be going there. Scheming since the age of 5 to travel there. That were based on more than just a desire to tour Puri's marketplace. And he was not satisfied by once seeing the deity in the noisy, crowded temple. He had been impelled to come to Puri as a pilgrim, and his motive was his devotion to Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Morning, we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 17, Text 9. Maitreya Uvacha Yada Bishikta Putu Anga Vipray Amantito Jana Tayas Chapala Rajanirane Chiti Prishta Etya Chamadeha Patim Abhyavochan Maitreya Uvacha Yada Bishikta Pritu Anga Vipray Amantito Jana Tayas Chapala Prajanirane Chiti Krishna Etya Suchamadeha Patim Abhyavochan. Maitreya Ruvacha Prajanirane Chiti Krishna Etya Chuchamadeha Patim Abhyavochan. Anyone else? A word for word. Maitreya Ruvacha. The great sage Maitreya said, Yada, when Abhikita was enthroned, Pritu, King Pritu, Anga, Adividura, deprived by the Brahmana, Amantrita was declared, Janatraya of the people, Cha also, Pala the protector, Praja the citizens, Nirane being without food grain, Krishte the surface of the globe, Etya coming near, Chut by hunger, Chama skinny, Deha their bodies, Patim to the protector, Abhyavochan they said. Translation. The great sage Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, at the time King Prithu was enthroned by the great sages and Brahmanas and declared to be the protector of the citizens, there was a scarcity of food grains. The citizens actually became skinny due to starvation. Therefore, they came before the king and informed him of their real situation. Therefore, information is given herein concerning the selection of the king by the Brahmanas. According to the Varnashram system, the Brahmanas are considered to be the head of the society and therefore to be situated in the topmost social position. The Varnashram Dharma, the institution of four Varnas and four Ashramas, is very scientifically designed. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Varnashrama Dharma is not a man-made institution, but is a God-made. In this narration, it's clearly indicated that the Brahmanas used to control the royal power. When an evil king like Vena ruled, the Brahmanas would kill him through their Brahminical powers and select a proper ruler by testing his qualification. In other words, the Brahmanas, the intelligent men or great sages, would control the monarchical powers. Here we have an indication of how the Brahmanas elected King Prithu to the throne as the protector of the citizens. Citizens, being skinny due to hunger, approached the king and informed him that necessary action should be taken. The structure of the Varnashram Dharma was so nice that the Brahmanas would guide the head of state. The head of state would then give protection to the citizens. The Kshatriyas would take charge of protecting the people in general, and under the protection of the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas would protect the cows, produce food grains, and distribute them. Sudras, the working class, would help the higher three classes by manual labor. This is the perfect social system. So, continuing on, this topics of Prithu Maharaj was stated previously. Vidura was asking, requested Maitreya to describe these different incidents in the life of Prithu Maharaj, and it was mentioned that these discussions are Krishna Katha, because actually Prithu Maharaj is a great devotee. Prabhupada mentioned yesterday, Krishna Katha, topics about Krishna or his incarnation, and his devotees, because they are the devotees of Krishna, just by hearing about them and their activities, will connect one to Krishna. Cannot but be connected in that way. So this is very pleasurable. The nature of spiritual talks, very inspiring and very enthusing, and actually one who's got a taste is never satiated in hearing about it. Just like many of us here, us older ones, have been coming and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam class for many, many years. Many, many years. And we've been reading these same verses many, many times, Maharaj. But there's always something fresh and new that you pick up on, that you perhaps didn't pick up on before. And even if you're reading the same thing, it's quite, you just couldn't do that with any other kind of book. We've read this 100 times, read this 1,000 times, so discussed it, throw it in the bin. Not reading this again, how to go. Newspapers, what do you do with newspapers? You don't want to read that story again. So, so this is probably what makes the point here about never being satiated. Of course, those who haven't got any taste, the materialists, they won't be very attracted to this. For them, they're more interested in other things, even though those other things in themselves do not really satisfy. Therefore, they've got to go on to have so many different varieties of things, and they recycle back to the same thing. They can't keep on the one thing all the time, so they move on different varieties. They're saying the variety is the spice of life. And that's true, and especially true spiritually, because that just goes to show that variety is inherent. And the desire for variety becomes, actually, it is deeper than just sensual and mental. There's an innate feeling for variety. And so that actually comes from the soul, and actually comes from the soul's connection to Krishna. So that variety certainly exists in the spiritual world. But in the material world, there's a desire for variety. We have so many, but you keep recycling the same things over and over. Especially as you get older, you just realize it's, more or less the same thing. That's why I was downtown Auckland. There's a street that we would go down on Harinam. It's the same street. Luckily, Harinam's eternal. Nothing else has changed. There's the same street, same building. There's the ANZ Bank that we stand outside of. I remember doing that 50 years ago. Probably another 50 years, I'll be doing the same thing. Whether that same building will be there, or who knows. But, nevertheless, that changes, but the Harinam is eternal. So, and the devotees enjoy doing these types of activities, whether it's Harinam Kirtan, whether it's discussions like that. So, and whether it's discussions, sometimes these stories of Maharaj and others like that don't seem to have much connection with the Supreme Personality of God, maybe immediately, but in the long term. We see how the connection is there, and we see them living their life following the instructions given ultimately by the Supreme Personality of God. It comes to today's verse in regard to how the system of the monarchy was there. Now we don't so much have monarchy. Only in a few countries of the world there's monarchy, and then more or less there it's a ceremonial role. You have the kings and the queens, but they're relegated to just attending functions, maybe swearing in the parliament, or swearing in the ministers and the prime minister, whoever it is. So it's a kind of more or less a ceremonial role. There's some countries, I think it's more, maybe I'm just trying to think of any countries where kings actually have administrative power. But certainly in the Vedic period, the kings had administrative powers with them, but they wouldn't act alone, and they would take guidance from many. Someone asked the question, last time. Someone asked taking advice. Now, when Yudhisthira Maharaj, the Pandavas all went to see Bhishmadev, Bhishmadev was giving some advice to Yudhisthira Maharaj about the duties of a king. And one of the things he said, I always remembered that he said that in the duty of the king, always take advice from others. Never take a decision by yourself, especially in important matters. I mean, day to day, little bit. But, especially in matters of state, he said, never always take the guidance and advice of others. So this was one, he gave many instructions to Yudhisthira about the duties of the king. And this was when Bhishmadev was lying on the bed of arrows and speaking. And so he was speaking to Yudhisthira. So it seems that the Brahmanas were so important that even they've got the responsibility and obligation to make sure that the whole system of life in the world is going on nicely. And the Brahmanas are not meant to be in the employ of anyone. They're meant to be maintained so they can engage in their study and their teaching, in their performance of different types of samskaras and yajnas, and this is full-time work. So if they have to worry about earning a livelihood, then they can't administer to that because they're always an anxiety about earning money. So in the proper Vedic system, they would be maintained. They would be maintained. So, and we sometimes see in the life of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in the life of Saraswati Thakur, that the king of Tripura invited him to be the Pandit, the royal Pandit, and because there was some corruption there and everything like that, he wanted him to, if I remember correctly, he wanted him to trace. They were Vaishnavas. The king and the whole family were Vaishnavas, and he wanted him to come there and trace out the history of the family lineage, and his research that he was doing. He was very impressed with Srila Bhakti. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati accepted that. After some time, he asked him to root out corruption. He knew there was a lot of corruption going on, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta knew about it, and he asked him to help him root it out. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did that for him, but short time later, he thought, this is not very good, getting entangled here and not engaging properly just as a Vaishnava and a Brahmana. So he requested retirement, and then the king agreed to that, and he gave him a full pension even after just a few years of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta staying there. And then, but after some time, I think that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gave up that. He didn't want to be, he wanted to be independent of anyone's patronage, and so the Brahmanas have to be like, they have to be able to speak what needs to be spoken, and so if you're in the employment of someone, or you're compliment, it's very difficult to say anything. If something is happening, something that should be pointed out, if you, by saying it, your own position is going to be jeopardized, then you're going to be very reluctant to say it. And so the Brahmanas have to be independent, so to give this very important information and to see and to guide how society should be living, and especially according to the principles of Varna Ashram. The system, of course, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I am the originator of the Varna and the Ashram. And when there's Varna and Ashram, then automatically there'll be proper rains, and there'll be proper grains. When there's Varna and Ashram, there'll be yajnas performed. If someone's living their life as a Brahmana, someone living their life as a Kshatriya or Vaishya, Sudra, and in a particular ashram. Then, according to Varnashram principle, there's certain regulations that one follows according to their position. There's general regulations for everyone, but there's more specific ones for the different varnas and ashrams. And so this was overseen by the Brahmanas. And then when someone who is a Kshatriya or Vaishya or even the labourer class, they would take guidance from the Brahmana. They had some questions, the Brahmanas were there to answer that, to give that guidance, to give that instruction how. And so they would, and they wouldn't charge for this type of thing. Now, this is something that someone brought up to me a while ago. They wanted to know whether we should be charging for the different yagyas and this and that. I said, well, the Brahmanas don't charge. They accept dakshina. They accept dakshina. This is the system, dakshina. And so it's not that they should, they give education freely. But of course, they have to be maintained. They may be married with children. They got their family. And so they have to be maintained. So then dakshina was given. And the kings and the Kshatriyas had to make sure that they were being maintained. And I remember when I went to Trivandrum in South India, I went to the Sri Padmanabha Swami temple. And the Brahmanas there were very nice. They weren't just asking for donations in a very, very heavy way. Like when you go to a lot of these pilgrimage places, they come and really harass you for the donation. And I was saying that I was asking, and you know, they seemed to be very contented. And I was told that actually these Brahmanas here were maintained by the Maharaja of Trivandrum. So he would make sure that the Brahmanas were maintained. They didn't have to worry about their livelihood. So then they could do the deity worship. They could do all the necessary activities. And so here the point is being made that even in the choice of the king, so the Brahmanas had to be satisfied that someone was qualified. So generally, there's not open election as to who was going to be the king or who was going to be the ruler. Today, in modern Western society, in a democracy, they have open elections because anyone and everyone votes. This sort of system was not there in the monarchical system. There were votes, but the votes were there by qualified people. They would discuss amongst each other. The Brahmanas would discuss, other elders would discuss, and they would discuss, and they would get everyone's opinion, and then take the tally of what everyone thought, and then in this way, the king, even though one was, born in the royal line, generally is expected that one will come to be the heir. But if the Brahmanas weren't satisfied with them, they wouldn't take the position of the king. So there's all these types of checks and balances. The main thing is that someone wasn't elected just by open voting system. The qualified people who were educated, they knew what the character of a king should be. They knew what the qualifications and so on and so forth, what the king and the others should be. And then knowing, by being educated as far as that's concerned, someone would be put in their position. But these days, you get these elections. There's all sorts of perhaps corrupt, especially in other countries, people pay. In India, someone was telling me quite often, especially in the rural areas, politicians secretly via someone else. They pay the villagers or the farmers to vote in a certain way. They're not supposed to do it, somehow or other they do. And so all sorts of things like that. Or even if they don't, if people vote for someone, what's their qualification of really knowing that person? What do you really know about? There's some distant personality. But the Brahmanas would actually know this person. They were living in the district. And they were educated to see what is the qualification. Now, these days, that's not even a consideration factor. They just vote, tick the box. and you just vote. You don't. There's no practical description of this person's qualifications. You know, whether he's got any education at all. He could have had no education. He might not have even gone to school. And but you know, if he comes across as charismatic, or you kind of like the look of his face, or look of her hair, or something like that. You know, I like the way she dresses. Yeah, I'm going to vote for her. You know, you know? Right? So yeah, right. Put her in, right? So you know, there's not much consideration. You know, I didn't like the way he looked at me. So he's not getting my vote. Right? That's it. Right? So there's not much serious consideration. So people are put in, whether they're qualified, who knows. Of course, they got their systems, but they're not ideal systems. So in those times, but even with these ideal systems, there sometimes were problems, just like as mentioned here with King Vena. Vena took over from his father, Unga, but then after a short time, even now it's mentioned that even in his youth, his Maharaj Unga was very so frustrated. And in his youth, he used to beat up children and do all sorts of heinous activities. The father would punish him in so many ways, but it just got worse. He was exasperated, and when he grew up, he was so that the father, in disgust, left the kingdom in disgust, and Vena took over. Later on, after his rule, he was a strong king, but he was very obnoxious. So the Brahmanas had to take action. Last resort, they took action and killed him by mantra. Well, they got very powerful, but knows that Brahmanas, there's no Brahmanas like that these days. But they killed him by mantra. You know, you chant mantra, you have the Brahman. They snapped the Brahman. They're so powerful. They snapped the thread and recite a mantra. One time we were thinking of cursing. There was one in Melbourne many years ago when we were young devotees. There was one council worker that used to harass us because we were out there selling books and didn't have proper permits. So, you know, we didn't even know, we didn't worry about doing any of that type of thing. So then he would harass us like anything. So it was going on for weeks and months. So we thought, let's curse that. We're going to sit around, a group of us sat around and cursing. We're Brahmins now. And we're gonna sit around and break our threads, curse. And somehow or other, it got back to Prabhupada. And the Vaishnavas don't curse. Generally, the Vaishnavas don't curse. Someone like Narad Muni or something, sometimes you see they curse, but it's actually for the betterment of that individual. They're going to go into Krishna Leela later on or something like that. They're great Vaishnavas. They can curse, but they're always thinking for the welfare. So we didn't even think about the welfare. I mean, we just wanted him out. So then they got back to no Prabhupada said, don't curse. Nor could we have broken our threads. Those threads not so easy to break. I don't know how the Brahmanas did it. But anyway, so whether they did it, maybe they didn't do it. But anyway, so they removed him, and now King Prithu is installed. So Prabhupada does talk about the Varnashram system here. It's not a man-made institution. So any man-made institution, whatever it is in any country of the world, there's going to be positives and there's going to be negatives. There's going to be flaws. You can never have it perfect because man in the conditioned stage is not perfect. So anything that is man-made, there's going to be a flaw somewhere or other. It can never be perfect. But perfect is given by the perfect personality, and that is the Supreme Personality. But he, Krishna says himself, I am the originator of this Varnashram, given by Krishna. So it's actually a perfect system. It's very scientific. It's meant to help one live in the world, although the material world is not our natural place. But nevertheless, we've come here. Krishna understands we've had a desire, so he arranges it. It's very unnatural as far as the spiritual. But he also arranges how to live here relatively peacefully, and at the same time become purified again to the point we come back to our original state of spiritual life and return back home, back to God. So, so Prabhupada goes on to say the Brahman is the intelligent class. So, I mean, you have this kind of a breakdown of society everywhere. They may not be officially called Brahmanas, and they have their nature because of the modes of nature, modes of goodness, passion, ignorance, and mixing together. You take your birth due to your desires, and you're placed under a certain mode of nature. So there's always going to be an intellectual class. There's always going to be an administrative class. There's always going to be a Vaishya, mercantile class, and there's always going to be a labor class. Some people, all people by nature will be inclined to be a worker, a laborer. They like that and they're good at it. They're very, very good at it. Laborers are very much necessary and they're really good at it. You know, we can do a few things around the house or whatever, you know, but we struggle and we're not, you know, I remember trying to bang up some wall somewhere and then making a mess of it. And then let's get the tradesmen in. And they came in and within 1 hour and started. It's so quick because they do it all the time and they become expert at it. And, you know, it took me days and then I made a mess. And then I just got them in and, you know, you pay a bit of money, but then you get stuff done. Supposed to get stuff. They're qualified. So the labourers are very much needed. But they're also under the direction of the Brahmins and the Vaishyas. So you always have people who are very inclined to business and making money. And they're very expert at it. They don't really need much training. It's in their blood. In their blood. Just like in India, the Maori class, and there's a different class of men there who are just in their blood, just to make, they just know how to make money, how to do business. It's just they're expert at it. If it's not very natural to you, you'll struggle at it. And you can do anything, you know, maybe you're born in a labour club, maybe your kind of nature is labour, maybe you can try other things, but your nature will bring you back again, somehow or other to where your nature lies. And so, and those who are intellectual, they're actually intellectual. You know, they can just study all day long. They can teach. This comes very naturally. They're intellectual, intellectual class. So the intellectual class, of course, the Varnashram is the Brahmanas. The intellectual class now, they're intellectual about so many mundane things. And it takes a lot of intelligence to be able to understand all that and to be able to teach it all. So, but it's superficial. The deeper intelligence is on the Brahmana level, and the Brahmanas would study the Veda. They would study the Veda from a young age. We still see in India, there's still the schools, the Gurukulas and the Brahmana schools would learn and they would recite the Veda, and they become very knowledgeable of the different branches of the Veda, and to instruct that, do the yagas and so many things, give guidance, so many aspects to it. They would learn that. They would specialize in certain areas. These ones were called Vipas. They would specialize, sometimes specialize in the Veda proper, but they would know medicine. And in those days, there weren't big hospitals in the Varnashram, the Vedic era, because the Brahmanas would go around when there was some problem with someone was sick. There were Brahmanas who knew medicine and they knew what to give. They would know that, so they would just go around everywhere and help people even on that. And no people got very sick in the youth. So it's a very nice system. And Prabhupada actually says here it's a very scientific, how it all kind of fits together. In that, if you just follow it, scientific in the sense, if you just follow it, you'll get a certain result. So if you follow it, no need to make up other systems, man-made systems. But people are very reluctant. They're very fiercely independent. They want to do it their way. And but then, okay, that's all right. You can do it any way you want. But then the consequences will be there, and they may be less than ideal consequences. But somehow, and I was saying last night, the Prabhupada wanted to have this Varnashram system, and he thought that, you know, in some countries, he talked about, maybe in some small countries that are very pious countries, he talked about Fiji, for example. Fiji, maybe you could introduce Varnashram there, and he talked about Mauritius. Mauritius, where the people are very pious. He's talking with the Prime Minister there. And maybe Mauritius can show the way of Varnashram type of culture. And so these small countries, the bigger countries could see that if it was nicely executed, that this might be a nice system to try. So Prabhupada did have an idea for Varnashram, And he did make a statement where he said 50% of my work is yet to be completed, and then he was indicating a farmer front. So this has been a topic of conversation for many decades in ISKCON, how the Prabhupada, what was Prabhupada thought on that, how do you envisage it, so on. All right, so Hare Krishna. So we'll end there. Has anyone got any questions about today's verse, today's class, comments? No? Hare Krishna. Jai, all glory to Srila Prabhupada ki jai, all feminine, Hari Hari Bol.